dare to listen in the dark. This is Miss Nightmare. Here, every story is a whisper from the shadows. Brace yourself. Fear has a new voice tonight. Psychological horror stories by Miss Nightmare.
The Mask of Truth. The Pact. Julia sat in the clearing of the forest, her hands trembling as she arranged the objects in a circle. The full moon illuminated her makeshift altar. A torn photo of her smiling with Aunt Lisa, a stained hair ribbon, a broken hand mirror, and a piece of paper with 3 names written in red ink: Andrew Miller, Brian Carter, Ethan Reed. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at the party. 3 weeks of forced silence, averted eyes in the school hallways, anonymous messages on her phone. 3 weeks since she tried to report what those 3 had done, and no one believed her. Sons of important families, they said. Your word against theirs, they explained. Maybe you misinterpreted the situation, they suggested. Julia closed her eyes, feeling tears run down her cheeks. The memory of her Aunt Lisa's laughter echoed in her mind, the only moment of true happiness she'd held onto since her parents died. That day at the amusement park, when Lisa took her to celebrate her 15th birthday. The cotton candy, the roller coaster, the silly photos in the booth. I offer my most precious memory, Julia whispered into the darkness of the woods. In exchange for justice. In exchange for truth. The wind blew stronger, snuffing out the candle she'd brought. In the broken mirror, for an instant, Julia swore she saw not her own reflection, but a tall androgynous figure draped in a flowing, tattered cloak made from broken masks, torn veils, and shards of shattered mirrors reflecting distorted faces. Where a face should have been, there was a translucent, shifting surface, sometimes showing the anguished visage of a young woman, sometimes the terrified faces of the guilty. When the candle relit itself, Julia felt something change inside her. An emptiness formed where the vivid memory of that day with Lisa had been. She still knew it had happened, but she could no longer feel the warmth of the memory, the taste of cotton candy, the sound of her aunt's laughter. The pact was sealed. Andrew Miller adjusted his expensive tie in the bathroom mirror of his parents' mansion. The fundraising party for his father's campaign had attracted the local elite, and as the only son of the future senator, he had to look impeccable. You're perfect as always, he told his reflection, wearing his trademark arrogant smile. That's when he noticed something strange. For a second, his reflection seemed delayed, as if it took a fraction of a second to catch up with his movements. And behind him, a tall, cloaked figure loomed in the shadows, its robe made of broken masks and shards of glass. Andrew blinked, confused. Must have been the whiskey he'd snuck before the party. Leaving the bathroom, he greeted important guests with his usual charm. Across the room, his father discreetly raised a glass to him, proud. That's when he saw Julia. She shouldn't have been there. There was no way she'd been invited. But there she was, standing in the middle of the room, staring directly at him. No one else seemed to notice her. "What are you doing here?" Andrew hissed, approaching quickly. Julia didn't answer. She just stared at him with empty eyes. Then, slowly, her lips curled into a smile that didn't seem to belong to her face. "It's time to take off your mask, Andrew," she said, but the voice wasn't hers. It was deeper, as if several voices spoke at once, and the air around her grew heavy and warped, with floating fragments of glass catching the light. Andrew stepped, back bumping into a waiter's tray. The crash of breaking glasses drew everyone's attention. When he turned again, Julia had vanished. "Are you all right, son?" his father asked, approaching with a worried expression. "Yes, Andrew stopped when he saw his reflection, in the large hall mirror. For an instant, he didn't see his own face, but a translucent, shifting surface, cracking, showing flashes of his own face twisted in fear. That night, Andrew couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of the party where it all happened. He saw Julia trying to get away. He saw himself laughing as Brian held her arms. He saw Ethan filming everything. The next day, during the political debate, his father hosted at school, Andrew was called on stage to talk about youth leadership. In the middle of his rehearsed speech, he felt his throat tighten. The words that came out were not the ones he'd planned. I need to confess something, he heard himself say, as if someone else controlled his voice. 3 weeks ago, at Tyler Brooks' party, my friends Brian and Ethan and Andrew tried to stop, but it was impossible. His mouth moved against his will, while the entire auditorium, including his horrified father, heard every detail of what they had done to Julia. Brian Carter always considered himself the rational one of the group, the smart one, the one who kept Andrew and Ethan in check, the one who planned everything. He was the one who orchestrated the smear campaign against Julia after she threatened to report them. He created the fake profiles, spread the rumors, convinced the others to stick to the same story. It's just logic, he explained to his friends. Our word against hers. 3 against 1. Simple social math. After Andrew's public confession, which shocked the entire school and was already circulating on social media, Brian isolated himself in his room, surrounded by books and notes. He needed to rationalize what was happening, find an explanation. Guilt-induced psychotic break, he muttered to himself, jotting theories in his notebook. Or maybe hypnosis, psychological manipulation. The sound of pages turning made him look up. His psychology book, on the desk, was flipping its own pages rapidly, stopping at a section on social masks and hidden personalities. Brian swallowed hard, approaching slowly. The letters in the book began to rearrange themselves before his eyes, forming new sentences. Brian, you can't rationalize your guilt. He slammed the book shut, heart racing. When he opened it again, the text was normal. That night, Brian couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard whispers. Voices discussing his innermost thoughts, exposing his manipulations, deconstructing every one of his rationalizations. And sometimes, he saw a tall figure, cloaked in broken masks and shards of mirror, standing at the foot of his bed, with long, crystalline glass fingers. The next morning, during philosophy class, the teacher asked the students to discuss the concept of truth and lies in contemporary society. Brian, would you like to start? The teacher asked. Brian felt the same sensation Andrew had described, as if something took control of his voice. The truth is that I manipulated evidence, he heard himself say as the whole class stared in shock. I created fake profiles to smear Julia. I convinced Andrew and Ethan to stick to the same story. I calculated that no one would believe her. His mouth kept moving, detailing every strategy, every lie, every manipulation. And worse, exposing his most intimate thoughts, his insecurities, his constant fear of not being as smart as he pretended. When he finally managed to stop, he realized someone was filming everything on their phone. At the back of the room, for a moment, he saw Julia. But it wasn't quite her. Her face seemed covered by a translucent mask that both revealed and distorted her features. Ethan. Ethan Reed had always been the most impulsive of the three, the most aggressive, the one who acted first and thought later. After Andrew and Brian's public confessions, he became a cornered animal. I'll make that bitch pay, he growled to himself, punching his bedroom wall. She did something to them. Hypnosis, drugs, whatever. Ethan was the only one who still didn't understand what was happening. While Andrew had turned himself in, accompanied by expensive lawyers, and Brian was hospitalized after a nervous Breakdown, Ethan plotted revenge. That night, he waited for Julia outside the public library. He knew she studied there on Thursdays. He hid among the cars in the parking lot, a metal bar tucked under his jacket. When he finally saw her leaving, alone, he moved quickly from behind. "You'll pay for what you did to my friends," he whispered, raising the metal bar. But his arm froze in the air. Literally froze. Ethan couldn't move it, as if his muscles and tendons had turned to stone. An intense cold spread up his arm, through his chest, neck, until it reached his throat. Julia turned, slowly. Her eyes looked different, deeper, darker. And behind her, the Unmasker materialized. Tall, draped in tattered cloaks of broken masks and mirror shards, with long glass-like fingers. "You can't touch me," she said, with that same strange, multi-voiced tone, and the air around her grew heavy and warped, with floating shards of glass catching the light. Ethan tried to scream, but no air left his lungs. The metal bar fell from his paralyzed hand with a metallic clang. "Look at me, Ethan," Julia ordered, stepping closer. "Really look at me." When their eyes met, Ethan saw not Julia's face, but a translucent, shifting surface that sometimes showed the anguished face of a young woman, sometimes his own face, twisted with fear. "You filmed everything that night," Julia continued, or whatever was using her voice. "You like to record your moments of power, don't you? To keep trophies." Ethan felt something vibrate in his pocket. His phone. With the hand he could still move, he pulled it out, trembling. On the screen, a video began to play automatically. The video he'd taken that night. The one he swore he'd deleted. "No, no, no," he repeated, trying to turn off the device. But the video kept playing. Worse, it was being broadcast live on his own Instagram account, where he had over 100,000 followers. Comments began to appear on the screen. Questions, accusations, disgust. Ethan fell to his knees, the phone still streaming, as Julia calmly walked away into the night, the Unmasker looming behind her, its glass fingers gleaming in the darkness. The unmasking. The following week, the whole school buzzed with the events. Andrew was under police investigation. His father had dropped out of the campaign amid the scandal. Brian remained hospitalized, diagnosed with a severe psychotic break. And Ethan, after his involuntary live broadcast to over 100,000 followers, faced not only criminal charges, but complete social ostracism. Julia walked the halls like a specter. Students made way for her, some out of respect, others out of fear. No one knew exactly what had happened, but rumors spread. Julia had done some kind of ritual, summoned something, made a pact. "She has something protecting her," they whispered. "Something that forces people to reveal the truth." At her locker, Julia found an anonymous note. "What did you do to them?" She crumpled it without answering. It hadn't been her, not directly. It was the pact. It was the entity that answered her call that night in the woods, the one everyone now feared, but no one dared name, the Unmasker. At night, in her room, Julia sometimes saw the entity's reflection in mirrors, windows, and screens. A silent presence that watched her, protected her, fulfilled its part of the deal. The air would grow heavy, and shards of glass seemed to float in the shadows, distorting reality. But the price had been high. Where the vivid memory of that perfect day with Aunt Lisa had once been, there was now only emptiness. Julia knew the event had happened. She even had the photo to prove it, but she could no longer feel the joy, the warmth, the love of that moment. It was like looking at someone else's life. Was it worth it? She asked the mirror one night, knowing the entity could hear her. The mirror fogged up slightly, and words formed on the damp surface. "Justice always has a price. You paid yours. They are paying theirs." The price of truth. 6 months passed. The case had been tried. The 3 boys, though minors, received severe juvenile sentences. The influential families couldn't cover up the case, not when the confessions had been so public, so detailed, so impossible to deny. Julia sat on a bench at the same amusement park where she'd spent that special day with Aunt Lisa. It was her 18th birthday, and she'd come alone, trying to reconnect with the lost memory. "May I sit?" asked a familiar voice. Julia looked up. It was Aunt Lisa, whom she hadn't seen in months. Since the incident, since the pact, Julia had distanced herself from everyone, even her only remaining family. "Of course," she replied, moving to make room. Lisa sat down, offering a small, wrapped package. "Happy birthday." Julia opened the present slowly. It was a picture frame with the photo of the 2 of them, smiling with cotton candy in their hands. From that very day, she could no longer feel. "You've changed, Julia," Lisa said softly. "Since that incident. You got justice, but you lost something in the process." Julia stared at the photo, desperately trying to feel something beyond the cold recognition of facts. "How did you know it was this day?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How did you know this specific memory?" Lisa smiled sadly. "Because it was the happiest day we ever had together. You used to talk about it all the time, remember? It was your mental refuge when things got tough. And then, suddenly you stopped mentioning it, as if you'd forgotten." Julia felt tears run down her face. "I didn't forget. I just can't feel it anymore." That night, back in her room, Julia faced the mirror. The presence was still there, weaker now, but perceptible. The air seemed to vibrate, and shards of glass floated around the tall, androgynous figure, draped in cloaks of broken masks and torn veils, with hands of sharp crystal. "They were punished," she said to the reflection that wasn't quite her own. "The truth came out. Our deal is done." The mirror rippled slightly, like water disturbed by a stone. "Yes," the answer formed on the surface. "But some pacts leave permanent marks." "I want my memory back," Julia demanded. "I gave you what you asked for. It's over now." The translucent mask appeared briefly in the mirror, and for an instant, Julia saw her own anguished face reflected there, mixed with the faces of the guilty. "Truth has a price, Julia. You chose to pay it. Some voids can never be filled again." Julia touched the mirror, feeling its cold surface under her fingers. "So what's left for me?" "New memories," the Unmasker replied. "New truths. And the certainty that no one will ever wear a mask near you without you seeing through it." The mirror returned to normal. The presence was gone, leaving only Julia's ordinary reflection. Older, more serious, with eyes that had seen beyond appearances. The next day, Julia called Aunt Lisa and invited her for coffee. She couldn't recover what she'd lost, but maybe she could build something new. Something true. As she walked to the meeting, she passed a group of freshmen on the university campus. One of them, a boy with an arrogant smile reminiscent of Andrew, was making jokes about a girl who had just walked by. For an instant, their eyes met. The boy's smile faltered when he saw something in Julia's gaze, something that seemed to see right through him, to his core. Julia kept walking, leaving him unsettled without knowing why. Behind her, for a brief moment, her shadow cast on. The ground wasn't quite that of an 18-year-old girl, but the outline of a tall figure, draped in cloaks of broken masks and shards of mirror, with a translucent, shifting surface where a face should be. The pact was over, but some marks remain forever, both on the victims and on those who dare to seek justice by their own hands.
If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like the video. Let me know in the comments what kind of horror stories you'd like to hear next. Sleep well if you can. See you soon.